So today we're going to talk about the topic of communication. How do we communicate with the opposite sex? It's going to take longer than 20 minutes for me to tell you that, but we're going to get there and get a lot of things going on, because lack of communication and miscommunication and non-communication are the primary causes for marriage troubles. Not money, not children, but lack of communication, miscommunication, and non-communication. Couples fight when they're not communicating correctly. Things like chores and money and children and time and habits all become part of that. They become arguments instead of discussions. Now, you can call it what you want to in your marriage. You can call it a quarrel, a conflict, a scuffle, a brawl, whatever you want to call it. But it boils down to communication issues. Dr. Ed Smith, who operates a large counseling practice, says that of the hundreds of couples he's spoken to over the years and years, most common complaint or question that seems to surface is this: why do men do some of the things that they do? Why do men do some of the things that they do? Second question for him is, why do women think the way they do? Third question is, why do we misunderstand each other so often? And so he said this, that often it comes down to a very simple statement. Here's the statement: men and women are different. You say, wow, Pastor, how long did you all go to school to figure out stuff like that? But what we find is that these difficulties that often attract us to one another are the same differences that cause us to divide from each other. So what's the solution? Let me give you a couple of scriptures to ponder for a moment as we get started. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25 says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. The two shall become one flesh." But Paul says this is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. Colossians chapter 3, verse 9 and 10, "Do not lie to each other, since you've taken off your old self with its practices and put on the new self." Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 and 30, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God." Here's something I've learned after 26 years of marriage and 30 years in the ministry and talking with hundreds of couples through the years. Men and women really do not know how to talk to each other. We think we do, but one thing is for sure: godly communication is essential for a good marriage. You can judge a marriage by how couples talk to one another. Now, what do I mean about godly communication? Listen to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 again. Different translation than I just read for you. "But watch the way you talk. Let nothing foul or dirty come out of your mouth. Say only what helps. Each word is a gift." Here's another version. "Don't use bad language. Say only what is good and helpful to those you're talking to, and what will give them a blessing." Godly communication. So with that in mind, I want to give you 5 keys to a godly communication that you can do and work out for your marriage. If you're not married yet, write this down. You're going to be one day, probably. Listen to what is being said is number 1. Listen to what is being said. That's the first key. Listen to what is being said. Proverbs 18:13 says this: "He who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame." It's a shame to him. Don't answer before you listen. Now, we've all done that. Think of how we react to a person who speaks a foreign language. Initially, it's quaint, and there's some kind of admiration and wonder as we talk to this person. How do they make those sounds coming out of their mouth, and how they do that so fast? But then, if you're stuck with this person and you have to get somewhere together or do something together, it doesn't take long for the admiration to degrade into something else. Frustration begins to set in. You probably would never say it, but you start to look at that person as dumber than you are, because you have to dumb down your communication, and you start yelling at them to try to talk to them, and they don't understand what you're saying. You start looking down on that person, and finally you begin to avoid that person because even the simplest interactions are just too much work. The same thing happens in marriage. At first, there's this admiration for the different ways men and women communicate. Wonder even. We just wonder about each other. For example, a young lady might say, gosh, my boyfriend is just so fixated on sports. That's so cute. But I'll change him. I'll change him. It's quaint and odd and entertaining, but not forever. Soon it becomes frustrating and judgment settles in. The person you believe is defective, they're almost insane. You can't even communicate with them because they're so focused on something else you can't even have a conversation. And so against this, the Bible commands husbands and wives to fight the uphill battle for the sake of love. Do you remember how easy it was to talk when you were first dating? Some of you have to go way back maybe to remember that. But you could talk about anything for hours. You talked about your past, your future, your hopes, your dreams. You talked about your plans. Now we're so busy that we settle for leaving a short note on the table by the door. Or when we are together, sometimes couples will do this. They'll pretend to listen to each other while their minds are 100 miles away. We have to learn to listen to each other. Turn off the television, put down the cell phone, talk, and listen. Key number 2 is this: be open and honest. Be open and honest. Say what you mean and mean what you say. I think Dr. Seuss said that. Say what you mean what you say. Here's what Proverbs 12:22 says: lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are His delight. If there's ever a place to be honest with each other, it's in the home. So, what are some things we should be openly communicating about that are honest? Well, let me give you a couple. Talk openly and honestly about your finances. If you hide things about your finances and your spending habits, there's going to be trouble. Be honest about where you go and what you do. You tell your wife you're going somewhere and you're not there, and they find out, there's trouble to be had. Be honest about what you feel and what you think. And here's another one. Learn to talk openly and honestly about sex in the marriage. Always, always, always tell the truth. It's one of the quickest ways to destroy a relationship, and respect for the person that you have is to lie to them. Because men and women both want somebody they can trust. Here's third key. Think before you speak. Think before you speak. Proverbs 15:18 says this: a quick-tempered man starts fights. A cool-tempered man tries to stop them. Let me just go ahead and say this. Guys are not as good at communicating clearly as women. I know that. I understand that. I want you to see this video, just this brief video clip by a Christian comedian, Tim Hawkins, who tells that and says some dumb things that guys say to their wives. So watch this clip as we see that.
The choreography myself. Hey honey, have you gained some weight in your rear end? The dress you wear reminds me of my old girlfriend. And where'd you get those shoes? I think they're pretty lame. Would you stop talking, cause I'm trying to watch the game? If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. I planned a hunting trip next week on your birthday. I didn't ask you, but I knew it'd be okay. Go make some dinner while I watch this fishing show. I taped it over our old wedding video. If you're a man who've done that, a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. Solo. Okay. Your cooking is okay, but not like Mother makes. The diamond in the ring I bought you is a fake. Your eyes look puffy, dear. Are you feeling ill? Happy anniversary, I bought you a treadmill. If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, that too. These are the things you don't say to your wife. You're a man who doesn't want to get killed with a knife. These are the things you don't say to your way.
Sometimes we say stupid stuff, guys do especially, but it's easy to say things that we don't mean, things we've given little or no thought to. And how many times has one sentence, one statement come out of your mouth and it's changed the entire day? In our professional and personal relationships, how many times have we said this to ourselves, boy, I wish I hadn't said that. But we did, and now we have to face the music. Unfortunately, in the real world, consequences for saying what you mean, for not saying what you mean, and meaning what you say are endless. Adults can ask for a do-over, like you were when you were a kid, but you don't get it. Here's what we do, those two sayings. We put our foot in our mouth, and we have to eat crow. And so we have to deal with our words. Solomon said this, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. That's a good one to write down or fill that out and look at that later. It's easy to let our emotions, our weariness, our frustration speak before our mind gets into gear. But the Bible says the wise man thinks before he speaks, and makes all the difference in the world, and all the difference in your day, and all the difference in your marriage. Think before you speak. Here's key number 4. Be kind in what you say. Be kind in what you say. Proverbs 12:25. An anxious heart weighs a man down, but a kind word cheers him up. Paul says this in Colossians chapter 3, verse 8. But now's the time to cast off and throw away all these rotten garments of anger and hatred and cursing and dirty language. Listen, it's not always what you say, but it is rather the way you say it. Have you found that to be true in your marriage? It's the way you say it. There's a story told of a king, an ancient king, who had this dream, and he dreamed that all of his teeth fell out. And so he brought his advisor in, and his advisor, he said, I want you to interpret the dream. He said, all my teeth fell out in my dream. The counselor said this, Your Highness, the dream means all your relatives will die and you will be left all alone. King didn't like that. He threw the guy out, put him in prison, brought in the second advisor and told him the same thing. Here's my dream. Interpret it for me. The second advisor replied this way. Rejoice, O king. The dream means that you will live many years. In fact, you will outlive all your relatives. Long live the king. That guy got a bag of gold. Difference in how you say it and what you say. So Solomon said this in Proverbs 21:9. Remember, Solomon had a lot of women in his life. Okay? Wrongly so. But he understood, I think, what was going on. Proverbs 21:9, he said this, better to live on a corner of the roof than to share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Now, that's in the Bible. It's better for you to live up on the roof in the corner than to share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Men, that applies to us as well. Be kind in what you say. And here's the last one. Say kind things. Say kind things. It's not just how we say it, it's the content as well. Proverbs 27:5. Open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. Here's another version of that. A spoken reprimand is better than approval that's never expressed. In other words, a missed opportunity to encourage somebody, to encourage your spouse, is going to be not good for your marriage. Encourage them. Build them up. Build up the one you love. Let the one you know and the one you care about actually know that you do care for them. Look for ways to encourage them, to compliment them, ways to build them up. Look for ways to say kind things. You know, our words have power and they can either hurt or heal. Sometimes we don't realize that. They can lift up and build people, or they can tear down people and cause destruction. And there's a lot of people in a marriage relationship that all they do when they do talk is tear each other apart. They tear each other down. They don't encourage, they discourage. Let me tell you, if you're in a marriage relationship like that, you need to do something about it. I'm not saying leave them. I'm saying you need to do something about it. You need to begin the communication process over. Because marriage is not about fighting each other. There's a saying that this: people will forget what you did, but they won't forget how you made them feel. Our words have the ability to bring out various emotions and feelings, and even after apologies, we all come in and apologize and say, oh, I'm sorry, honey, I'm sorry I did this, and I apologize for that, or whatever it is. Even though it happens, the memory rarely fades. The reality is this: when it comes to what you say, people don't forget. People don't forget what you say to them, especially the person you're married to. They don't forget. They may forget to stop and get the milk on the way home, but they don't forget what you said to them 5, 6, 7, 25 years ago. They don't forget it. So be careful and be kind in what you say. While words like this are not okay, ready for these 3 words? These are never okay in a marriage. Always, stupid, or any of those derivatives for stupid that you think of, and never. You never do this for me. You always do this, or you're stupid. There are some phrases that will breathe life into your relationship the minute, the moment, the second that you say them. So I want you to think about some kind things you can say about your spouse today. And for some of you, this may be new ground. I don't know. I hope not. But think of some kind things to say about your spouse. I'm going to give you some ideas that you can go home and practice. Okay, here's the first one. You are my best friend. Tell your spouse, you are my best friend. If they are not your best friend, you need to do something about it. Your spouse has to be your best friend. Great marriages are made up of 2 friends who respect and love each other, faults and all. Your best friend is someone you want to be with and care for when times get tough. Your best friend. Guys, if your best friend is a guy that you go do something with, you've got it confused. You've got it messed up. It's got to be your bride. It's got to be your wife. So tell them, you're my best friend. Here's another phrase. This is a tough one. Thank you. Thank you. We'll say thank you to the person at the grocery store or somebody who holds the door open for us. It's common courtesy, but somehow we stop saying it to our spouse. Thank you for taking out the trash. Thank you for making dinner. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for that. Saying thank you shows appreciation, and you have a heart of gratitude. Here's another one. You may think this is strange, but here's a phrase. I think you're sexy. You say, what are we talking about that in church for? Listen, you think it or you say it about some movie star, some music star, or somebody else. Why don't you say it to your spouse? Some movie star that you think's good looking, oh, he's sexy or she's sexy. How come you don't tell your spouse that? The passion, the butterflies, the chemistry don't have to die once you get married. Telling your spouse how sexy they are will give them confidence and build emotional and physical connection. Here's another one. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you've made a mistake, fess up and be quick to apologize. I'm sorry shows your marriage matters more than your ego. You know, the Bible says, don't go to bed angry. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Say you're sorry. Do something about it. How come the Bible says don't let the sun go down on your wrath? Because you're going to get up just as wrathful. You're going to wake up ticked at them, wherever you are, wherever they are. You're going to wake up mad. Resolve it before you go to bed. I'm sorry. Here's another one. What do you think about so-and-so or about such and such? What do you think, honey? Asking for their opinion shows that you value their ideas. What do you think about this? Here's another one. I'm proud of you. You tell your kids that, don't you? I'm proud of you. You hit a home run. Or I'm proud of you. You did this. You made an A. I'm proud. How about telling your spouse, I'm proud of you? We want our spouse to be proud of us. This one simple phrase will give them the peace of mind and the energy they need to keep going. I'm proud of you. Here's another one. We are in this together. We're in this together. You need to be your partner's cheerleader at all times. When the world, when her or his boss is tearing them apart, you need to be their cheerleader. You need to be cheering for them. You need to be rooting for them at all times. We're in this together. We're a team, is what you're saying with that. We're on the same team. We're fighting for each other. We're on the same side, not fighting against each other. Here's the last one. I love growing old with you. I love growing old with you. What's that mean? It means that you and your spouse have weathered the storms. You've weathered the storms together. You've weathered some tragedy in your life, some death, some sickness. You've weathered some financial loss. You've weathered some strong something has caused some loss in your life, and you've weathered those storms together. You've learned from each other. You've cried together and laughed together and have a deeper understanding of what true love is. Dreaming of the future brings security into that relationship. You're simply saying that your love will last for a lifetime. I love growing old with you. Maybe you've never heard of this couple. Zelmira and Herbert Fisher. Zelmira and Herbert Fisher. They have the Guinness World Book record of being married the longest. They were married before they died. They both died at age 105 a few years ago. But they have the record of being married 87 years. They were married in 1924. Before they died, somebody interviewed them. Somebody figured out, hey, I need to go talk to this couple to see what's kept their marriage together for 87 years. And let me give you some of these question and answers as we close. Let me tell you about it. They asked them this: what made you realize that you could spend the rest of your lives together? Were you scared at all? And here's what the response was. With each day that passed, our relationship was more solid and more secure. And here's what she said. Zelmira said this to the reporter. Divorce was never an option. It was never a thought at all. We were committed to each other. Back in 1924, and even to the time they were interviewed. Another question. How did you know your spouse was the right one for you? How did you know they were the right one? Well, he said, well, we grew up together. We were best friends before we even got married. And he said this: a friend is for life. Our marriage has lasted a lifetime. Big question. What piece of advice about marriage the best piece of advice that you ever received? Here's what they said. Respect, support, and communicate with each other. Communicate with each other. Don't stop talking to each other. Love each other, they said, with all of your heart. You got married very young. How did you both manage to grow as individuals yet not grow apart as a couple? Because that happens a lot. Couples grow apart. They said this: everyone who plants a seed and harvests the crop celebrates together. We are individuals, but we accomplish more together. They understood husband and wife are one. Another question. At the end of a bad relationship day, what's the most important thing to remind yourselves? They said this: marriage is not a contest. Don't keep score. We are on the same team and we want to win together. So a couple's been married 87 years. Did you ever fight? Yeah, they fought. They said, is fighting important? Well, they said never physically, obviously. But they say agree that it's okay to disagree and fight for what really matters. Here's the phrase. Learn to bend, not to break. Bend a little, compromise a little. That's huge. Last question. What one thing do you have in common that transcends everything else about your marriage and your relationship? We both, here's what they said, are believers in Jesus Christ. We pray to Him every day together. We've given our life to Him. We've given our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren to Him. That's the best thing that we've done in our marriage. And it's the best thing that we can pass to our kids. We are followers of Jesus Christ. Listen, if you're married, one of you's a Christian and one of you's not, there's going to be all kinds of problems. Not just communication problems, but all kinds of problems, all kinds of issues. Someone has said this: marriages may be made in heaven, but the maintenance must be done on earth. God's given you the opportunity. God's given you the skills. God's given you the ability to build this relationship. And so for marriages to survive, they require regular maintenance. They require lots of effort. And all that stems from this: fantastic communication. If you don't talk to each other, if you're more interested in what's on the television than what your spouse says, then your communication is going to cause problems into your marriage, and your marriage is going to continually drift apart. So if all you do at night is sit around and watch TV and don't talk to each other, then your communication is breaking down. Now, you say, well, we talk during commercials. No, I'm talking about spending time talking to each other. Not too long ago, I was in a restaurant, and there was a couple in there, I don't know, middle-aged, older than me. They were further past middle age, I guess. She had her phone out, and he had a newspaper. And through the entire meal, I watched them. They never spoke to each other. This is in a public restaurant. They didn't speak to each other. She was on her phone eating and scrolling, eating and scrolling. He had the newspaper up where he couldn't even see her. I don't know, maybe they had a big argument before they got to dinner. Or maybe they had an argument like maybe some of you have, like we have, where you want to go eat. I don't know where you want to go eat. I don't know where you want to go eat. It doesn't matter to me where you want to go eat. So maybe they had that argument before they got there. But I thought, if they don't communicate like that in public, what are they doing at home? One goes to their room, the other goes to their room, and they don't talk. One has their television they go watch, the other has their television they go watch, and they don't communicate. Listen, communication is so important. It's the lifeblood of a successful marriage. And so when spouses stop talking on a deep level, here's what happens. Their marriage slowly begins to die. After all, a marriage will only be as good as a couple's communication. You and I, if you're married, or you're going to get married one day, you had better be prepared to fight for that in your marriage. Fight for the communication. Turn off some things. Change some habits. Do some things. Whatever it takes, find a way to begin to talk to your spouse again. Go on a date, for heaven's sakes. Leave the children behind. And go on a date with you and your spouse and talk and communicate. And remember all the things that you're together for in the first place. God's put you together for a specific reason, specific time. Enjoy that. Enjoy that. So this week, Friday night, Thursday night, Tuesday night, it doesn't matter. Go on a date. You can find somebody to watch your kids. Go on a date. Now, your date, your creativity is going to come into play here, okay? You figure out what's fun for you two to do together. But go on a date. Why? To talk. To talk. I can think of no better way that Jennifer and I have communicated together is when we've left the girls behind and go on a date. And you know what? We've made a rule. They don't like it. Hey, they're in college. They're gone now. What do? We go and we talk. And we've made a rule. For the first 5 minutes, we can talk about them. But after that, it's just about us. It's just about us. Communicate. If it takes a date night every week, go do it. Go do it. Now, going to the Walmart is not a date, okay? Going to Lowe's is not a date. Go spend some time, just you two together. Communication is the key, okay? As we go through these things in marriage that we're fighting for our marriage, that's the key. Don't forget, communication is the key. Last week we talked about the convictions. We understand why we're married, what marriage is all about. Man and woman, that's what it is. That's how God designed it, forever for life. But communication is the key. Once communication breaks down, the rest of it will come tumbling down after. Talk to your mate. Talk to them.